Good evening all. Right, so it's time to do a little update on my Cyclekart, see how progress is coming along. So I've just got the front springs mounted up, or one of them at least. I'll show you how I've mounted these. Yeah, so you've got the spring eyelet on here with the through bolts going through into here, so that holds that there. And then the alternative way of mounting it, which I've kind of gone for, is this alloy bracket here with a PTFE kind of bush in here, so the spring sits in there. So as the spring compresses, it can slide in and out on this bush here. Got a little grease nipple on here, so I can pump some grease in there. And that just bolts on there. Yeah, because normally you'd have a spring shackle which can move. So this is just a alternative way of doing it. I'll show you how it kind of goes together. So you can see the spring sits in there. It's got room to move back and forward. So yeah, it all looks quite good, and I think it should work, but we shall find out. So why have I done this? Well, it's because I haven't gone out and got some proper Cyclekart springs. So these springs have come from an old set of leaf springs from an Austin 7. So I thought I'd reuse these rather than shelling out good money for some new springs. So we shall see how they go. I think they might be quite firm on the ride. There's not a lot of movement in it. So I may even end up cutting a strip off these springs just to try and soften them up a little bit. But yeah, they look quite good as well. So part of the Cyclekart building process is to make your cart look more sort of vintage styly. So yeah, trying to get the aesthetics right is part of the build, and I think they look quite good. So if you look on a Bugatti, the mountings are very similar to this, so that's where I've kind of copied these from. But once I've got it on the ground, on the wheels, and I can jump up and down on it, I can see how much movement there is in these springs. But yeah, you could get these leaf springs off anything from like an old MGB or Morris Minor or something like that. Just get an old leaf spring and take one of the leaves off, or the top leaf off, which has got the eyelet on the end, and then chop it off at the desired length. So you don't need any kind of eyelet on this side of the spring. So it's just a way of using old springs, really. Something you should be able to pull off a scrapyard somewhere. Yeah, so hopefully these will work nicely. Of course, got grease nipples in here for the bush inside this eyelet. These eyelets are worn. They would have normally had like a brass bush inside them, but the bolts had worn right through the brass bush into the steel. So what I've done is got some PTFE strip, softened it up, and moulded it into the eyelet, and then wound the bolt through. So you can see that. And that's the same PTFE strip as I used on these sliders as well. So I bought this strip, or this sheet of PTFE tape, PTFE plastic. I think it's about 4mm thick. Just bought it off eBay. So I'm sure I'll use more of it for other things, but it'll come in handy. Yeah, so that's all looking good. And then also I've got the engine mounted up here finally. So rather than using the Honda 200 engine, I'm using a Chinese moped engine. It's a 125cc. So you can see I've got the sprocket mounted on here. So what I did here was chop the inside of the wheel out, so it's got the splines on it. Turned it down in my lathe, and then bolted this sprocket onto here. Then I've remade up this arm here So you've got a bearing in here which supports the shaft here, and then I've got an idler sprocket on here. So, and that is adjustable, so I can move it up and down. So if the chain comes off the top of the sprocket, it goes under here, and that brings it under the bottom of the crankcase. Otherwise the chain would come here onto the big sprocket on the axle, and it would end up hitting the bottom of the crankcase here. So that's why I've had to put this idler sprocket just to bring the chain down a bit. So I think that should all work quite nicely. You can see kind of roughly what I've done here. Took ages to work out how to make this bracket, just using the bolts or mounting points on the engine. Yeah, that's looking good. And the mounting point, so I've made up a bracket on the back of the swinging arm here. You see it just bolts through here, and just an L-shaped bracket, and then a large rubber mounting on the bottom here, and then that's all mounted on there. Just welded a big chunk of alley on the back of it. In fact, that's box section actually, but that should be strong enough. And then top mounting, this is how the engine is mounted normally in the moped. You've got this big steel bracket here with a through bolt going through, the rubber bush here and a rubber bush here. So the big bolt there, so it's all swinging, free to move. And then I've just modified the mounting a little bit, put a plate here and a plate here, so I can put a bolt on there and a bolt on there, and that will go through this tubing here, so I can bolt the engine to this bit here. And then I've welded a bracket, or tube, sorry, all the way down here. And what I'll do for further support is, once I start building the frame, the seat will rest somewhere around there, and there'll be a more aluminium framework coming up here. I'll just put a cross piece onto here, and again cross piece onto here to support this upright here, just to give a little more strength. So it's a little awkward mounting this engine, as it has to sit above the axle, so it's sitting quite high, so it will affect the centre of gravity. But I intend to mount the seat, the driver's seat, way down. So I've got the chassis rail here, so I'll be sitting probably 4 or 5 inches below the chassis rail, just to keep the centre of gravity down. That should make everything more stable. That's all work in progress. I've cut out a sheet for the floor pan, so I just need to make some sheets for the side here, but I need to get the car on the ground, just to work out the angles and get it all looking right. Yeah, that's about it for now, I think. Yeah, happy building. Okie dokie, out for now.